What's up, everyone? This is Anthony Kim, and you're probably wondering, what on earth am I wearing? Well, what I'm wearing is a tool belt, and what I'm here to do is talk to you about a new show that I've produced called Bridging the Gap. And Bridging the Gap is really about how do we rebuild education in this time where we're struggling with so much around the pandemic, the politics, economic uncertainty, social justice issues. And I called it Bridging the Gap because I wanted to think about what is it that we need to kind of rebuild education towards. And that's why I got this tool belt and my rope. So go on this journey with me, and I'll see you on the other side.
I think it would be an understatement to say that we're living through life-changing and challenging times.
David, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited about this conversation. When we talk about equity and the work that needs to be done in school systems, I think I see a lot about equity in strategic plans, and it's an initiative and all of that, but it's really got to be in the DNA of an organization. And so as you think about where districts or schools you work with are, where do you think they are in terms of like red, yellow, green scale? Like, are we in kind of the red space where we're just talking about it, not doing enough? Or are we in yellow where we're trying different things and some things are working and some things aren't? Or are we green? I don't think you're going to say we're in green yet based off of what I saw on Twitter recently on your feeds, but curious where you think we sit and how do we move from one color to the next?
Thank you so much for that question. Specific to, the kind of traffic signal, kind of indicator, that you gave me, we're certainly at a moment that we should stop, and here's why, I think it would be an understatement to say that we're living through life-changing and challenging times. We're facing multiple pandemics. There's the health crisis precipitated by COVID. There's the social crisis reignited by the murders of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, and the recent shooting of Jacob Blake. There's also the economic crisis legislated by a series of poor decisions from our political leadership. But through it all, we are remaining diligent, finding ways to hold each other up and hold things together. But that's not necessarily enough. I've been blessed to partner with communities and schools joining the fight to advance equity in education and beyond it. And though we fight to advance equity, which is the principle of fairness based on a recognition that all of our students are different and come to their education with different needs, we also fight to end the systemic racism and white supremacy that make advancing equity in schools impossible. That's our red light. That's where we are. And this is the brave conversation that we must have if we're going to move forward in this moment of stopping and understanding and watching and seeing what's happening across our schools. That race determines, perhaps over-determines, school access, school opportunity, and all the other desirable indicators that we see in education, right? This is the conversation. That as our boots beat the ground to pay homage to the blood spilled from the violence of systemic oppression. So what I want to ask is, what does it mean when your job is to enforce a law or curriculum, when that law or curriculum is explicitly racist? If this is the case, and you do your job and you do your job well, that means you enforce, even reinforce racism. Today, I want to ask, how might we change our job descriptions in this moment of pause? How might we in a post-COVID education world make education, more anti-racist, more culturally responsive and sustaining, and radically reimagined for all of our students? How do we call for new institutions that instead of murdering the bodies of our children, love them instead? How do we call for new institutions that truly uphold justice? Because Cornel West said that justice is what love looks like in public. So let's not think what's happening across the streets of this country has nothing to do with us.
Unbelievable that, we've been in this situation for so long with so much effort going into this in many ways. And one of the things that I do think I see shifting in the country is community involvement. I know you believe a lot in kind of community engagement in this work. How can we actually educate the community better so that they can make these asks and be clear with the school systems that they live in what they need? Because I think the clearer their voices are, the more responsive some of the schools can be.
One thing I believe is that we cannot and we should not romanticize community or multiple communities. We were just talking before we began to record about some of the white supremacists and alt-right communities that come after me on Twitter. These are communities too. Mm-hmm. We have to also acknowledge and understand that we're facing multiple diseases. And these diseases, are pandemics of amnesia, indifference, and apathy. And indifference, as Michelle Alexander tells us, is a form of racism. Apathy is a form of racism. We might find a cure in our questioning, though, turning the lens of scrutiny onto ourselves and asking, how do we center care in all that we do, right? What does it mean to care for, a body that we've been so taught not to care for, but to see and hold as disposable? How do we become more than just allies, but co-conspirators in the revolutionary work of education? Because answering these questions will raise other ones, such as what should we be doing now in education to improve it later? Our schools must become places that we go to heal the sicknesses of our souls. In this moment of Black Lives Matter and COVID-19, we are being taught that a new world is possible. I think this is where we sit. It's true that various narratives of disparity shape how we understand education. This is why we march.
I mean, there's got to be some pockets where you see, okay, we're doing pretty good. And then there are other pockets where we're just not doing enough or not even thinking about it. Like, I'm just thinking of buckets like, is it in the curriculum? Is it in the professional development? Is it in our hiring practices? Is it in our policies? I mean, you'll probably say it's everywhere, but I'm just curious, do you see any pockets where there's some, light there where it's going from red to yellow, or is it all red across the board?
There are three things that we must do. First, we listen. There are many ways to listen. My friend, psychologist and gender theorist Niobe Way speaks of the science of human connection, which is beginning to help us to understand the root systems plaguing our culture and social communities. Niobe speaks of what she calls the crisis of connection. The idea that so many of us, so many of our ideas, our systems, our fundamental human practice is shaped by disconnection. This is what structural racism is. It speaks to how systems are disconnected from the very people they serve on the fundamental basis of our skin, right? On a fundamental basis of race. This is what culturally irrelevant curriculum is. It is curriculum disconnected from the lives of some of our students. And this disconnection shapes a far more powerful narrative of success and failure than anything else in education. But worse, it leads to consequences of structural and emotional violence that turns into structural forms of trauma and the kinds of threats that make education a hostile site for many of our children. So how do we connect, right? We listen thickly. And we listen thickly by doing things like equity audits and by using instruments that allow us to hear from the people so that we might get crucial information about them. Because how do you teach someone you do not know? We have to use this time, right? Red light, to hold listening sessions, conduct empathy interviews with students, focus group conversations with parents. We must get a sense of their experiences and their wisdoms, because when we do, they'll tell us how to teach them. When we listen, right, we begin to dream up the protocols, in the systems that give us time to hear, time to learn from those who are most implicated by the decisions that we make.
What I'm interested in is, from your perspective, how do we listen well? How do we help people? Because I think a lot of leaders that I talk to, they're I'm out in the community and I'm doing things, but that doesn't mean you're listening, right?
That's right. Yeah. In order to listen well, we must dare to partner, right? Which means that we must resist the impulse to make decisions alone, right? We have to develop kind of like a cultural gauge that says, no, I'm not going to go at it alone. No, I'm not going to take the top rung of the hierarchy. Instead, I'm going to partner with people. right? So I'm going to enlist the support of those parents and those students, who I need to listen to, because those who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution. Once we get to the right questions together, we'll be closer to getting to the right answers together. Perhaps the biggest issue with the old system was that it wasn't designed, for each of us, by all of us. The current system, works well for those who designed it. It works horribly for those of us it was imposed on.
It represented itself so clearly with the pandemic pods, right? In a certain social economic class where you could afford to do that, they got together, they collaborated, they shared, they put resources together, and within a matter of months, it was all over the country where a solution was developed for a certain group of folks that could afford it. But to your point, like, they communicated, they collaborated, they co-developed, and came up with a solution that works for them right now. And I think that the challenge that we face in the other part of the socioeconomic class is that maybe they don't have those opportunities to collaborate and the resources, and how can we put those systems in place? So my last question to you, David, is what should we be imagining as possibilities in school systems? What should this look like? I mean, really, like, I know you read a lot of Derek Bell, and he describes in his book, Faces at the Bottom of the Well, the land, right, and that imagination you need. And I feel like we should be doing something like that for school districts. What's that land of education that we should be imagining?
The first step, right, to this radical reimagining project that you're talking about is locating the womb so that we can focus on healing them. But not just the broken body of those of us who have suffered, but also healing the broken souls of our school systems. How can we turn the lens of trauma-informed care outward and onto our systems to see where and when they are sick and hurting children? To be sure, our children aren't broken, but too often our systems are. From an anti-racist perspective, the action required right now is about healing the global pandemic that afflicts our world with bias, infecting countless institutions with the disease of sight that make these institutions incapable of seeing certain bodies as valued or valuable or even human. So healing the system, will take time. So when we go back to physical classrooms, it must be okay if we don't just go straight into the curriculum, at least not to week 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, or 12, right? Let's move at the speed of trust, because this time spent healing ourselves and our students, building relationships and interpersonal wealth will take us farther than just pressing forward while sick. There's another African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. Right. And I've said this before, we have to sit with that question. What does it mean to go together? And I can tell you that the evidence is on the side of slowing down and moving together and healing first. I did a study of classrooms recently. One set of classrooms jumped into the curriculum on day one without purposing healing, without ensuring all students were equally ready to go. They privileged Bloom, Bloom's taxonomy, or questions of what to teach over who we teach. Another set of classrooms took time to purpose healing, to focus on and center students and their well-being, to collectively address the social and emotional aspects of learning before going into the curriculum, so that all students were equally ready to go. They privilege Maslow, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or questions of who we teach before questions of what we teach. The classrooms that paused at the beginning ended up going farther than the ones that launched forward on day one. Not only did these classrooms that paused end up covering more curriculum, more material, the students did better. Not only that, the students felt better. You see, this is about experience. It's about Maslow before Bloom. It's about how do we curate better experiences that center our students for our students. Because we don't teach English or science or social studies or math. We teach students English, science, social studies, and math. And at the center of these constructions are students. And because of them and for them, we don't want to go back to normal. We want things to improve and we want to heal. And part of that improvement will mean envisioning a system or set of environments that are welcoming and affirming, where the least desired or redundant components of the curriculum are omitted. It will mean dealing with the idea that school is a place of punishment for some of our students, and that this punitive narrative is usually based on some of our most dangerous and biased logics. The basics of education are things like pleasure, play, creativity, curiosity. And when our children are hurting, they're things like healing and restoration and care, right? And you see this joy-based reimagining of education will involve more human-to-human interaction, collaborative learning, less or no homework, very few assessments that are continuous in nature, and group assessments that feel less burdensome. A joy-based reimagining of schooling, their bell, is one where we replicate spaces that center our students and let go of anything that continues to marginalize, exclude, or harm them.
That was awesome, man. I really appreciate you sharing that. And I just feel so fortunate after just the few minutes that we just spent together to hear your thinking on this. Thank you so much for doing this and making time, and congratulations on your new post in NYU.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, man.
When we talk about racial equity, the way we define it is ensuring that your race does not define what experiences you're engaged in.
Having an aligned, guaranteed, and viable curriculum.
Blue sky would mean that every child has internet access in their household.